Eala, the results haven't been there on grass after such a great start to the year. Why she's not getting the results we normally see on the surface?
She's very... Eala's not had too many wins in Grand Slam events, we have to say that, but she is good on grass. She got to the final at Eastbourne last year. She won the title in Birmingham.
There is a piece of cardstock pinned to a wall inside the All England Club this week. Printed on it, in a font no one is meant to admire, is the number 29. Above the number is a name, Alex Eala. The card itself is unremarkable, the kind of small, bureaucratic placard the All England Club uses to label every seated player on the draw board. You could walk past it. Most people will. But that card is the receipt for something. It is the paperwork at the end of a very long sentence, and the sentence began years before anyone outside Manila knew how to pronounce her name. Eala hasn't had many deep runs at Grand Slam events yet. We should say that plain, but she is good on grass. She reached the final at Eastbourne last year. She won the title in Birmingham. She is 21 years old. She is the world number 30. And as of this week, she is the first Filipina ever seeded at a Grand Slam. The card doesn't say any of that. The card just says 29. Tonight, on the eve of Wimbledon 2026, we're going to find out what that number is hiding. Wimbledon begins tomorrow, Monday, June 29th. Eala enters seeded 29th, fresh off a 6-week grass court stretch that took her from a Birmingham 125 title on June 7th to a Berlin semi-final a week later, to a first-round loss in Bad Homburg 6 days ago. Today we're going to do something different. We're going inside Alex Eala's actual routine, the real habits behind her climb into the WTA top 30, using only what she has said on record and what the people around her have said on record. She has trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca since 2018, coached by Juan Bosch. She is left-handed, which functions almost like a routine of its own, a structural quirk opponents have to game plan around every single time she walks onto a court. That's the curtain. We're about to pull it back. Here's the trouble with a story like Eala's, and you should know it before we go any further. The spectacle is loud. A number 29 seeding announced with fanfare. A possible second-round match against Serena Williams, who entered on a wild card, if Eala wins her opener. A doubles partnership with Venus Williams that began last week in Bad Homburg. An Andy Roddick podcast episode dedicated entirely to her back in March. The center court storyline is already writing itself, and 100 social media accounts have already filled in the rest, speculative morning routines, an invented breakfast menu, a fictional 5 a.m. wake-up call, lifestyle videos built around food she's never actually confirmed eating. None of that is in this script. Eala hasn't publicly disclosed the granular shape of her mornings. What she has said on record, and what the people who work with her have said on record, is enough. It's actually the entire point, because the gap between the spectacle and the routine is the whole story. The spectacle is the seeding card. The routine is what put her name above the number. And the routine is unglamorous in a way that almost nothing about tennis at this level is supposed to be. Sunscreen. An outfit she likes, she's mentioned liking Khalida and ZC as well. Hair fixed the same way every time. A warm-up. A physio session with a man whose name you almost certainly don't know. A coach in the player's box who's been there since she was 14. The hero of this story doesn't win because her routine is magical. She wins because it's consistent. That's the tension we're going to sit inside for the next 15 minutes, and the evidence for it is all on the record. Start with what the seeding actually represents, because seeding isn't a vibe, it's an arithmetic outcome. As of this week, Eala sits at world number 30 on the WTA Tour with 1,436 ranking points and a career-high ranking of 29 reached on March 16th of this year. Her 2026 record stands at 27 wins and 16 losses in singles, with $52,858 in prize money earned so far this calendar year. Those are the receipts. The seeding isn't a gift. It's the line at the bottom of a spreadsheet. But seeding tells you the score. It doesn't tell you how she got the points. Most recently, those points came from 1 week in Berlin. On June 18th, in the round of 16, Eala played Elena Rybakina, the world number 2 at the time, a Wimbledon champion, a player whose first serve is widely considered the single heaviest weapon on the women's tour. Eala won 7-5, 6-4. It was her first career win over Rybakina and her fifth career win over a top 10 player. She didn't go home after that. She played again next day. On June 19th, in the quarterfinals, she beat Aryna Sabalenka 6-3, 6-4 in 1 hour and 23 minutes. Back-to-back top 10 wins less than 24 hours apart on grass, the surface that's supposed to punish small frames and tired legs the hardest. That kind of turnaround isn't improvised. You don't borrow that from talent alone. You bank it slowly, over months and years, by being in bed by a certain hour and on a physio table by another. The Berlin run ended in the semifinals against Linda Noskova, 6-2, 6-4. But the damage to the ranking math had already been done. Take a breath here, because there's a temptation, watching footage like that, to make it sound like a montage. It wasn't. It was a Wednesday and a Thursday. It was 2 days of work that looked from the outside like a miracle, and from the inside almost certainly like a Wednesday and a Thursday. That distinction matters. That distinction is the whole video. 3 weeks earlier, on June 7th, Eala had won the Birmingham 125 final against Nikola Bardenkova 5-7, 6-3, 7-5 in 2 hours and 38 minutes, closing it out as the top seed from a set down. It was her second career WTA 125 title after Guadalajara the year before. At the trophy ceremony, she said something that becomes more interesting the more you sit with it. "I am so honored to be lifting this trophy today. Lifting this trophy does not mean that I will be among the greats yet. So I am motivated to keep working." Her own words, not yet. So what does the work actually look like? The most direct, on-record answer she's given came in an interview with Cover last August, describing her matchday routine in plain terms: a warm-up, eating beforehand, and, in her own words, "I like to look good. I like to have my outfit. I like to fix my hair. Sunscreen, non-negotiable." That's the actual quote. That's the actual routine. There's another layer, the part she doesn't post. Her coach, Juan Bosch, a fixture at the Rafa Nadal Academy, has been with her since she was a teenager and has spoken at length to ABS-CBN on record about her work ethic. Her fitness and medical lead at the academy, Luc Bourgeois, was credited by her own team on Instagram for rehabbing the shoulder injury that had threatened to derail her hard court season earlier this year. Two names, Bosch and Bourgeois. Two names you probably didn't know an hour ago. And the receipt for all of it, the coaching, the physio, the unglamorous repetition, arrived 3 weeks ago in Berlin against Rybakina, then against Sabalenka on consecutive afternoons. The seating card on the All England club wall is the delayed receipt for those 2 days. That's the climax of the story, and it's small enough to fit on a piece of card stock. Pull back now to the outside voices, because routine is a thing you can describe, but it gains weight when other professionals confirm what they're seeing. Andy Roddick, a former world #1 and US Open champion, dedicated an entire episode of his podcast, Served, to Eala back in late March. He co-hosts the show with John Wertheim, senior writer at Sports Illustrated and a 60 Minutes correspondent, two of the most credentialed voices in American tennis media. In their newsletter, they called her the pride of the Philippines, described her trajectory as a meteoric rise, and, not inaccurately, called her a national hero. On the episode, Roddick teased her about her maturity, joking, characteristically, that she seemed to him secretly 47 years old underneath the 21. He meant it as a specific compliment. Players who carry themselves the way Eala carries herself in interviews, measured, low volume, deflective in a way that isn't false modesty so much as a professional reflex, usually picked that up from somewhere. In her case, the somewhere is Juan Bosch. Bosch told ABS-CBN in the network's feature documentary Born for Center Court that what separates Eala isn't a single weapon, but the steadiness of her preparation. Remember the promise of this video, the real habits, not the imaginary ones. Here's what real looks like. A coach who sat in the same chair for years. A fitness lead who quietly puts a shoulder back together. A US Open champion who watched enough of her tape to commit a full podcast hour to it. That's the validating chorus, and none of it requires invention. Now widen the frame, because this seeding isn't happening in a vacuum. This year's Wimbledon women's draw includes a generation of players her age and younger, including Emma Raducanu, the 2021 US Open champion, seated one spot behind her at number 30, Eala at 29, Raducanu at 30. That's the company. That's the room. And the math of how she got there matters beyond her own ranking, because no Filipina has ever been seated at a Grand Slam before. Not at Wimbledon, not at the US Open, not at Roland Garros or in Melbourne. Southeast Asia has had intermittent Grand Slam presence on the men's side for decades, but the women's draw has never carried a Filipina seed into the second week bracket math until now. The cultural reaction has matched the moment. Threads on r/Philippines and r/tennis carrying the seeding announcement crossed 300 upvotes within hours of the bracket leaking. Filipino fan groups across Facebook have been circulating images of the draw all week. Some of those posts are speculative, fabricated morning routines, invented training schedules, and we're deliberately not repeating them here. But the underlying signal is real. A country that spent 2 decades watching its boxing and basketball icons carry its flag in global rooms is now watching a 21-year-old left-handed tennis player carry it into one of the oldest rooms in the sport. Tomorrow, for the published draw, she faces Renata Zarazua of Mexico in the first round. If she wins, the projected second-round match is against Serena Williams, who entered Wimbledon on a wild card. That's what being seeded 29th in 2026 looks like in practice, a winnable opener and a generational name waiting on the other side of it. And then the part of the story that keeps it honest. 6 days ago in Bad Homburg, Eala played her first match after the high of Berlin. She lost. Elise Mertens beat her 6-3, 6-3 in the first round. Mertens' third straight win over Eala in their head-to-head, including a Madrid second-round meeting earlier this spring. There was no dramatic narrative buried in the loss. Mertens was simply the better player that day, on a surface that suited her timing. Eala hasn't publicly addressed the Bad Homburg result. What she has done is enter the Wimbledon draw 6 days later anyway. That's the part of the routine nobody photographs. Losing a match on a Tuesday and being on a practice court somewhere in southwest London by Friday. The routine doesn't make her invincible. It makes her repeatable. And repeatable in this sport is about the closest thing to a superpower there is. So look at the room she's in now. A year ago, Alex Eala walked into Wimbledon as an unseeded wildcard hopeful, with 3 junior Grand Slam titles on her resume and a ranking that didn't yet warrant a placard on the All England club wall. Tonight, on the eve of the 2026 tournament, she sits in the seeded players' room at the same club, a 21-year-old, number 29, with a possible Serena Williams second-round storyline ahead of her, a Venus-Williams doubles partnership already on her schedule, an Andy Roddick podcast episode on her timeline, and the distinction of being the first Filipino seed in the history of the sport beside her name. The 2 men whose names you didn't know an hour ago, Juan Bosch and Luc Bourgeois, are credentialed into the players' box. 6 days ago, she lost 6-3, 6-3. Tomorrow, she walks out onto center court anyway. That's the routine, the sunscreen, the outfit, the hair, the warm-up, the repeat. It didn't make her famous. It made her seated. That number is still on the wall. She is still under it. In her own words, from Birmingham 3 weeks ago, lifting this trophy does not mean that I will be among the greats yet. So I'm motivated to keep working. Not yet. Keep working. That's the routine. That's the climb to the top 30. And tomorrow, on center court, that's the room she's in now. If you want to watch the receipt arrive in real time, subscribe. We'll be covering every match of her Wimbledon run right here, starting with the Zarazua first round. Tennis Unfiltered.